So in Kubernetes, to run applications, different API resources are provided. I'd like to talk a bit about API resources and make sure you fully understand what this is all about. So after you are using a command like kubectl create deployment myapp images nginx replica sys3, the myapp application is started in Kubernetes. We have just done it, and you have just seen how this application is implemented using different resources. Each API resource is required because it adds functionality required to run an application in a cloud-native environment. And why is that required? For the simple reason, because running in cloud-native changes the entire application behavior. If you run your application on a standalone server, your application can fetch its information from the hard disk. But which hard disk are you going to access if your application runs in cloud? That and so much more is taken care of by these API resources. And a huge part of your understanding of Kubernetes sits in the understanding of these API resources. So that's going to be a main mission in this course. So just remember, in a cloud-native environment, the application is not directly related to any server. And that means that the functionality normally taken care of by your individual servers is now stored in the cloud, handled by these API resources. So which API resources are there? Well, the Kubernetes API provides these different resources, and the main resources, the ones that we've seen so far, are the deployment, which are used to represent the application itself. And much more, but we will talk about that later. It's just the first impression that matters here. Next is the replica set. A replica set takes care of scalability by managing application replicas, which really are application instances. And there's the pods. Pods add features that are required in the cloud to run the actual containers that are running the application. What kind of features are that? Well, features that help the cloud determining about pod priority, for instance, about pod resource usage, for instance, about pod affinity and anti-affinity, and so much more, which you will learn all about in lessons 5 and 6 of this video course. 2 lessons completely dedicated to all the things that you can do with pods. But apart from deployment, replica set and pods, many more resources are provided. And you can use kubectl API resources for an overview. Now, before I'm going to make a nice drawing to visualize the most essential resources for you, let me just show you kubectl API resources for a first impression. So here I am back on the Google Cloud. Let me use kubectl API resources. And I know that a lot is coming, so I'm piping the output immediately through the less command. And there we can see the pods, and where is it, the deployments and the replica sets. But apart from that, as you can see, many more resources are available. And these resources are not offered by one API. There is the API version v1. This is what you can consider the core Kubernetes API. But as we will further investigate later in this course, the Kubernetes API is extensible. So you can see that other APIs are available. The most important add-on API is apps v1, which is what defines the deployment and the replica set. But as you can see, so many other APIs are provided, and they make that you can safely run your applications in a Kubernetes environment. Now let me make a drawing to visualize how the most essential API resources are used in the Kubernetes environment. So what is happening with the API resources if you run a container? Well, it all starts with the container, but the container itself is not managed by Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is going to put this container in a pod. And the pod is really the managed entity by Kubernetes. In the pod you will find different cluster related properties that are important, like volumes, for instance, which are taking care of storage. Now this pod is being managed in a replicated way. So in most cases you won't have one pod, you will have multiple pods. And in order to take care of the replication, there is a replica set. Replica set does exist as an independent API resource, but replica set is not normally managed as an independent resource. That is why we have the deployment. So the deployment is, as you can say, really the application. So if you are going to run an application in Kubernetes, you are going to run a deployment. And this deployment is taking care of the replica set, and the replica set is taking care of the pods. Now, apart from that, there are many other components that will play a role. One very important one that I want to mention here is the service. You are going to expose your application so that users can use the application, and in order to do so you will use the service. So users are contacting the service, and the service has an externally represented IP address. But you are also going to use config map, for instance. Config map, which is to connect site-specific information to your application, like variables, or secrets, which is the same as a config map but in a more secret way. And then you are going to take care of persistent volumes and much more as well. Now, the nice thing about all these API resources is that these API resources make sure that you can run your application in a cloud-native environment. Because don't forget, in a cloud-native environment, your application is no longer bound to one specific server. Your application is getting its information from cloud. So you need a solution to store all that information in cloud. And this is going to be it. Much more about that in the upcoming lessons.